right, hello everyone, Richard Carlton. Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I am the creator and most core conspirator of fmtraining.tv, where every day we're trying to do great FileMaker training. So if you look at the upcoming broadcast schedule, today is going to be FileMaker backups. And it starts at the beginning level and then goes intermediate and then it goes advanced and it goes like triple X-rated ninja level. So Jacob's going to walk us through triple X-rated ninja because he's good at that. I'm going to start the conversation off with beginning. So the last 4 days, 3 or 4 days, has been this progressive conversation about how do I share? Now we have these two products, and then where do we go from there? And so that's where we've been taking. Yesterday we did the introduction of FileMaker Server, the administrative console, and then today's more on backups. Moving along, besides I'm excited, we're going to talk about FileMaker backups, which are the least exciting thing on the planet. However, okay, and I'm not allowed to say the F word, so I'm just going to say, if you screw this up, then these goes from being very boring to very exciting, right? Shall we just say that if you administer FileMaker Server and you don't do backups properly, you may give yourself unnecessary excitement. And I mean that in a negative way. Excitement can be negative or positive. Yeah, so real quick, let me cover something that we touched on briefly yesterday. This is the desktop of a server that's my Mac. We discussed this. This is my in-house personal FileMaker server. So I eat our own dog food, right? People say, oh, FileMaker this and FileMaker that. And I can name you the consultancies who don't actually use it, which is really a shame. If you use FileMaker, you believe in it like I do, you should be able to use it productively in an organization. And if you're not, then yeah, so maybe you're not the best advocate for the platform. So this is a Mac server. We discussed this it's a M1 processor, right? So it's a fairly beefy, high performance system. I always buy the maximum amount of RAM on a computer, and it's because I know that nothing bad has ever come from too much RAM other than a larger credit card bill. But what bad comes from underbuying RAM is performance. And whenever you have a performance problem, you're never sure whether you cheaped out on RAM was the problem, right? That kind of thing. So it's got an internal drive. I've got 4, and these are all solid state drives. These are fairly high performance drives right here. And they are there. We write the backups to these drives. So I'm going to log into this real quick. We're going to pick up the conversation yesterday on backups. So this is the administrative interface right here. It's a web browser. You can run this on your computer. I happen to be running it on the server itself. Okay, we're cool with that. And then I'm going to hit back. Well, here's databases. There's databases here. These are all databases. They show they're running. Shows who's logged into them. Once again, my internal test server. And Jacob's going to show his server here momentarily as we get more advanced. But I want to bring up some important things. So over here, you have on-demand backups or the auto backup. This is where Claris gives you, like, by default, when you install FileMaker Server, you get 7, I think Jacob said 7 backups that run once a day at midnight or something, and it keeps 7 days. So even if you have no experience with FileMaker and you built yourself a server and you didn't ask for any advice, if you asked me or Jacob for advice on the basic configuration settings, we will give them to you. We will not charge you for them. We want you to be successful. But if you fail to take advantage of free advice, then Claris does give you 7 days of backups, 1 backup a day at midnight. Remember, the operative thing here is if you crash your FileMaker server, you always restart the server. And a couple things, I guess, go into this real quick, is that you set the server not to auto open the databases, so if I go over, Jacob, is that under config or where's that at? The config, yeah, right here. Startup settings. Screen. So right here, will normally be on by default when you install FileMaker Server. That's bad, okay? Right? If you want to let bad, like Satan, into your FileMaker Server, just turn that on right here and then have some power outages and stuff. And sooner or later, he will visit, okay? Or whatever you believe in that's really negative, like little ghosts and goblins. This is a blank check invitation for them to show up and make your life miserable, okay? The reason this is in here is because the marketing department, or someone way back in the day, this goes way back, 20 years ago, the marketing department thought this would be a really good feature to have, because they always wanted server to be as reliable and as nice as possible. The rub is that to have this to be turned on automatically, if there's a crash, the server should automatically roll itself to the last good backup if it crashes. Because remember, if you're using a FileMaker file and you don't close it properly, either FileMaker Pro closes it properly because it's local, right? Like it's running locally over here in FileMaker Pro, or the server's running it and it doesn't close properly. Those files are potentially damaged, and automatically suspect, okay? And so the idea is that you're going to, in a situation where this thing crashes, we would go through a process where we would find the original files. In fact, we talked about this as we did a restoration of that. So this setting should be off. That's one thing. The other thing that came out, and this came out back with FileMaker 15 or 16, maybe 14, goes back before Jacob actually was doing FileMaker, is that when you would make a backup copy, so let's go over here to my backups, okay, and you see backup schedule. Backup schedule is schedules that I set up. So there's an hourly backup, and if I look at the settings, it keeps 24 copies. So this is an hourly that runs. It keeps one for every hour of the day. And after one day, it starts overwriting. So if you keep 24 backups and it makes number 25, then the oldest one gets deleted. Okay. The oldest one gets deleted. Very important. Okay. So I'm going to close that down. So these, we're keeping copies as a daily one. We probably keep, off the top of my head, at least 30 days, if not more. 32. I don't know how we came up with 32, but we have 32 days on that drive right there. And then you have this weekly one, which probably would be like 99, which would be almost 2 years, right? So that's almost 2 years of backups on here. It's pretty great. So let's talk about how this is possible, because this database right here, think about this. My data set right now, because I am a document, I collect aviation documents as an instructor. I collect all sorts of stuff. And so if I go into FileMaker server, I go to the data folder here, and then I have databases. These are the live databases right here. I'm just gonna hit Command I and get information. It'll take it a second. Oh, did it pretty quick. It's 40 gigabytes essentially is one copy of the database. And you're like, well, if you kept 24 copies, you'd have 24 times 40. Whatever that number is, big number, whatever that number is, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gigabytes. And so what if you kept 99 copies or 100 copies? Then you're times zero, then you're heading towards terabytes and stuff, right? Pretty rapidly. So the issue becomes, well, not quite. Is that short?
I was going to say, math-wise, I did the 24 times 40. That's 960. You're just short of a terabyte already.
Yeah, that's a lot. So the idea is, you're like, well, Richard, how can you afford to pay for drives that much? I mean, because really, you don't make that much, and this is free training, and where do you make all your money? All right, well, the reality is that FileMaker realized that there were a lot of wasted backups, because what happens is that you really want to back up all day, every hour, and you don't care who's there, right? And what some people do is like, oh, I'm going to make a backup at noon. And then I'm going to make a backup at 5 o'clock. And then we're not going to back up again until tomorrow at noon. Except the problem is that what if someone comes in at midnight, you have like a night shift, or someone comes in for overtime, some sort of important problem, they do a lot of work, the system crashes, you have to restore from the last backup. Bad juju. So what ends up happening is that Claris decides that it's why I tell you to turn on all the backups, because what it does, it will save space. The concept is called hard linking. So let me show this to you real quick. I'm just going to, so we have 40, these things are about 40 gigabytes each, right? So here's 24. How big should this be right here? Jacob, you said 24 is how big?
Just shy of a terabyte, 960.
It's like 960
40 times
gigs.
24, that's our ballpark number.
So I'm going to say get information on this folder right here. What just happened? Did I hit delete?
Moved it to the trash.
Okay, I just undid that rapidly before anything bad happened. Oh, I was off by 1. Okay, that was, my butt puckered very rapidly because this is a live server. I'm going to hit get information. I'm hoping this works the way it's supposed to. 0, that's perfect. Let me see. I'm going to turn something on real quick. I'm going to turn on, I'm on the wrong thing here. I want to turn on view, show view sizes. I want to turn on calculation sizes here. That will probably, here we go. So there you go. And then it starts doing the math, right? And then it starts chewing away. Got 40, got another 40. So here's the deal with this, is that this folder right here, this whole folder of hourly in here, probably doesn't have more than 60 gigs in it. And you're like, how the hell is that even possible? Here's the deal with hard linking. Let's just take a basic contacts file right here. So here, let's say, here's your analogy, right? You ready for this? I haven't explained this in a long time to anyone. So here we go. I'm going to let this kind of process down here in the corner and let it keep going. I'm going to get rid of that. We just have that. All right. So this is your main live file. And let's say that FileMaker makes a backup. And so it comes over here, and there's a folder over here called, let's just say, hourly. And this is just kind of a hypothetical. So that we're going to so I'm going to option drag it here and make a backup. Okay. So now there's a backup in here, and it would put the date and time and timestamp on here for us. That's cool. Or on the folder. Okay. So that is the idea of a single backup. And then say that's at 5 o'clock at night. And then everyone went home at 4:30, right? And the server says, that's time for the 6 o'clock backup. And in the old days, it would actually make another copy, keep both, and then would name and put a different timestamp on it, essentially, right? And you're like, well, that's great. So now we got, this and this, and it starts to add up. Well, what they did is this thing called hard linking. What it does is it looks at this and it says, so if I start it again, let me just start the conversation all over again. If it makes the first backup, there's nothing in here. Okay, I need it. So it makes a backup, and it makes a backup of all the associated digital documents, the remote containers, right? We're all following. It made a full copy. Then it goes, hey, I'm going to run the backup again. But before it does it, at warp 9, it goes, hey, have I changed anything in this file? Right? And you're going, oh, so it won't save it. If it won't make a save if there's changes, or if there are no changes, it's not going to make a backup. Kinda. It understands that it doesn't need to give you a full file, but for simplicity, to keep everyone's head from exploding. Because if I go into a system and I say, show me 24 copies, right? I'm going to come over here and I'll say, I want to see my 24 copies. And if I don't see 24, I'm going to pull a knife and I'm going to start stabbing things, trying to figure out what's wrong with the server. Or did someone delete the files maliciously? Or did ransomware get into my server? Because you said 24, there should be 24 there. Unless a hard drive is full or something blew up, there should be 24 there. And so if you're over here going copy, 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 but it only had, no one made a change since Friday at 4:30. So it's Friday at 5, make a copy. Friday at 6, make a copy, all the way to midnight. Then Saturday all day and Sunday all day. So what it does, it goes, hey, did I make a copy? It didn't make a copy. So what I'm going to do in here is I am going to essentially, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make an alias here. This is a close idea of it. Not that one. It makes an alias of this one right here is technically a better answer here. And so it makes an alias. So so to me, then we have 2 backups, 2 copies. This is the original. This one points to that one. Now, I made an alias as something that we manage as a human. You can see the little checkbox in there. The icon looks a little different. It says alias on it. But over here, if you look at these, does it say alias or say anything weird like that on there? Nah, they look legit. And what it is there's a hidden marking function where it says, hey, I'm going to make a hard link. I'm going to link to the original file. Nothing has changed, but I need to show it in 2 spots on the computer, right? Yep. And so you get 2 backup copies. Why are there 2? Because that way your head doesn't explode as a user or a developer. You have 24, you want to see 24, the 24 in there. You don't have to worry about if it's hard linked or whatever, because this does represent the state of the database at 6 o'clock. And then maybe a database of the database at 7 o'clock, and then maybe the database at 8 o'clock. Does that make sense? And the whole point is that, well, it's the same file. Yeah, because it's saving the space, but it's giving the link. So if we go here and it says 8 o'clock on this one, like over here has little times and stuff on the folder, right? The actual file may be one that was written a day or 2 ago, or if it's the remote containers, how often do remote containers change? Almost never. So it might link back to the very beginning. So in here, I would guess there's only 1 copy of any of the containers I have. And then if I make change to databases 5 times a week, there might be 5 unique copies buried in here, maybe over a course of a week, but over a day, maybe 2 or 3. So let me try to do this again. I'm going to try to get it.
So I have a question.
You have a question.
Yes.
See, right there, that number right there is a lie. That is a bold-faced lie right there. Now, it's doing it on purpose, but you understand what I'm saying? Because if I go to the hard drive, that's 974 gigabytes on drive B. So we go over here to drive B, and I get info on drive B. Drive B shows that we've only actually used 160 and 840 are available. One of these numbers is lying to you. Which one's lying?
Yeah. What you are looking at is an accounting of 974 gigs. That would mean you have 26 free. Am I doing the math right? Right?
Or you could be past that. You could be past it. You could say, well, I've got 2 terabytes over here, and the drive is a 500 gigabyte. And you're like, what kind of weird black magic is that, right? And so This is one of those things that doesn't get explained to people. Claris's entire discussion of this is 2 sentences. And they say, oh, it's hard linking. And you should know what hard linking is because it's obvious to anyone who's a programmer what hard linking is. I had no idea what it was. Jacob probably did, but I had no idea what it was. And so, Margaret, ask your question.
So anytime there's a adjustment in the information, even if it's small, it saves an entire new copy?
If on a file by file basis. So if it's just in the data, like if you go into here in the database over here, you've got databases. And then if I go into whatever, some database in here, I add, oh, there's a fire marshal database. I add one record, edit one little bit. It knows it's changed. So then the next hourly backup that runs would be actually a full copy of the database, but not necessarily the containers. See, the containers, it goes, hey, that container changed? No, then link to the one. So my guess is that there's only one set of containers in here. It says 974. If we get information on that?
So quick math, 40.6 times 3, you have daily, weekly, hourly. What is, that's 120? How full is your drive? You have 160. And 12 is the Ventura installer. So we're at 132 of 160, just we can stare at it, easily accounting for this space. So you probably edited a couple databases sometime in the last week.
I use it almost every,
right.
I at least look at it every day, but I don't add data every day. I think I added data 2 days ago to one of the files. Right. So if you get really busy and everyone's beating on the database, then you're going to have probably 24 unique copies in here of the FMP 12 files, not of the containers, because odds are you're not editing the PDFs and stuff. Okay. So this hard linking right now, all of you who haven't bought any of my training, have watched this for free. All of you should be like, Richard's really awesome. Go buy the training that we provide because I just saved you a ton of time and effort. That explanation right there is worth money.
Question from Stu. How is hard linking different than incremental backups?
Incremental backups. Okay, that's that. Okay, so well, then we should talk about Jacob. I'm going to keep going on this until I run out of knowledge, and you're going to take over. Are you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I might even be able to. Go.
If you come over here and say, I'm going to move this file and I'm going to move this and do something with it, the danger is that you're like, well, I'm going to remove one of the backups. You've got to be careful about renaming a file or moving a file because these other files, like say the original is right here. Well, you don't know which one the original is unless you do some Unix stuff and get some command line stuff and then look for the little flag that says it's a 1, it's the original. But you don't know. So as long as you don't step on it, but there's probably parts of the originals in all these, right? Probably, right? And so what ends up happening is that you could remove the one original that 20 or 30 or 100 other backups reference. So you've invalidated all the other ones that were space saving. They just notated it, right? They didn't change, so they're just going to notate that one. You get rid of the one, you don't even know you've done it. So yesterday when I said when you're especially on, if you have a backup on the boot drive, this is where this really becomes applicable, right? If I'm on the boot drive, here's fine. So on the Windows, it's a similar path. It's program files and FileMaker, and then whatever, FileMaker right?
Server,
so yeah, and
pretty close.
And I used to do that all the time. So here's FileMaker server. Here's data. So now here is that hard linking works. Hard linking for the moment works everywhere on all platforms, and there's a big asterisk to that. We'll talk about that momentarily. But it came out, and I thought it was worth the weight of all the upgrades, right? Just to get. So you could save all this hard drive space. Instead of terabytes of drive space, you didn't need that much if you weren't that big. So down here, these are the backups. So if I drag, so say that the server, we crash the database, and I'm like, I'm going to crash it. And the database crash. I take all the databases, I move them out over here, and then I grab one of these. That's the backup, and I move it in here and rename it. You might really destroy your backups. You might really easily destroy your backups because they're linking. So what you want to do is always copy the one you want. Like do some sort of duplicate it or whatever you want to call it. The duplicate will be fresh and fair, and you can put it in there and use it, but it'll be a fresh copy. The way the way these backups work is that they hard link within the same backup schedule. Okay, at least it used to be this way. I tested this a couple, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's within the same backup schedule. So if you it still does, okay. So if you come over here and you're like, I got weeklies, I got hourlies, I got dailies. Those are 3 schedules. Then there's the files in here won't cross hard link to ones over in here, right? They're all contained. Whatever it is contained within that folder. So if you make a copy outside the directory, you make a duplicate copy, you're safe, right? That's why it wasn't such an issue when I moved from drive A to drive B, 2 different drives, because you can't move. There's no such moving as moving a file from drive A to drive B. If you did, it would be a copy and a delete, right? But mostly it's just the copy. You got to be careful with that. So that's that. So incremental backups. Incremental backups are this other feature, session timed out. Okay, let me log back in. I'm a questionable person. So if you go to configurations and then persistent cache, database publishing engine, where are the persistent, oh, it'd be over here, folders or something like that.
Folders is the
progressive
location.
backups. There it is. So progressive backups. So progressive backups are some Warp 9 technology that came out that Claris continues to use this a little bit. Now, what it is that it creates a rolling folder of a backup, and all it does is save the changes to that file. So every time it runs an incremental backup, it's creating a complete. I mean, Jacob, you want to try to explain this? I'm not doing a very good job. I'm right.
Sure.
I think I'm starting to decaffeinate. I need more caffeine, but try to explain the piecemeal process, and I can open it up probably. I'm sure. What's disabled?
Yeah, if you turn it, if you enable it, it will actually yell at you to tell you it's writing out a whole backup right now. You kick that off right then. So, so it's the keyword in incremental backups is incremental. And so if you think about that, it's just the changes. So you have your contacts database. The default for example, a progressive backup. Sorry, they're called progressives. Incrementals, like one of the folder names that's inside of it is probably.
I found it right here. It is.
I find that word way easier. Yeah, there's in progress, copies, changes. So I find calling it incremental backups way easier to think about because everyone knows what an increment is. What is a progressive backup? I don't know. By default, an incremental progressive backup runs every 5 minutes. So the very first time it runs, as Richard just kicked it off, he's going to end up here shortly with a folder with a complete copy, not of the container data actually, but of the records, which is the FMP12. It runs every 5 minutes. So if you think about it, you go in, you've got people using your system, they're doing whatever, they're operating the business, editing records, blah, blah, blah. But like across 5 minutes is probably not that much data. So FileMaker can isolate 5 minutes ago, current. What's the difference between those two things? And then it can take just that snippet and go boonk and stick it on the database. That's a very quick operation. If you have a 40 gigabyte database, it would take a really long time potentially to write that whole backup out. If you modify 2 megabytes of data,
not that big of a deal. And most people don't even modify that much. So the idea is that it has typically 2 copies that are, it says copies, but there's only 1 here in progress. So so this thing, well, it shows it's pretty busy. Let's take a look at the okay, FileMaker server D, whatever it was doing, it's done. The operating system is done. The process down there is super low. So let's just take a look at what we got. So you've got copies here. That is a copy. Is there more than 1 in here?
Those are just the file. Oh, it does bring the container over. Nice. Good.
Yeah, it should do that initially, and then it kind of just keeps up the day. So the whole idea with this is kind of the idea of we're saving time, but it saves time with, like, the hard linking as an operating system level behavior, okay? And so Claris said, hey, the operating system already does it. Let's just take advantage of that. The incremental backups, and it's called that under the hood. If you go look under services, it's called IB, incremental backups. Right?
That's why it's the name that I refer to it. All the settings.
Stu, did we answer the questions on the incrementals? Right? So if you want to restore, you need to go over here and grab the restoration out of here. Okay.
Yep. And that can be incredibly helpful. So part of the discussion about like backups and which ones and how do you use them and stuff like that. So depending on your business and how fast it moves and stuff like that, there's a pretty large discussion. We've had it before on live stream about which backups, how do you design backups that you're going to use, thinking about how fast your data moves. If it's just people editing a basic CRM, updating contact records or something like that, may not move too quickly.
There
If you are
goes. It's
doing
doing something right
e-commerce,
now. Or it's going right now, doing a little
Yep.
incremental thing. All right.
Nice, you got it. Yeah, and then if you expand out, I guess the incremental backups, does that actually have all the databases in it? Oh, nice. So you can design, your own kind of resiliency situation for your business. You have all these copies, you can restore them from backup so you don't end up with corruption in the file. That's always good all day. The benefit and the usefulness of something like an incremental backup is, again, like I said, it runs every 5 minutes. That can be incredibly helpful, especially if you have a fast-moving data, I'll say data system, whatever that is, different databases, whatever it's doing. Because you can minimize potential data loss to like 5 minutes max. That's usually short enough. Most people can honestly remember what they just put in, and they might even be able to re-enter it if you can get them back up and running quickly enough. So it's a great it's a great story for like server restorations and stuff like that. Of course, I love that. That's my job. But it, realistically, one of the really expensive things about, for example, restoring a database backup for a company is if that's not true, where it would be prohibitive or expensive or difficult or whatever to get that data back into the system. So sometimes, it crashes. All right, occasionally you can do kind of shenanigans to get the data cleaned up and kind of put it back into FileMaker and do all that kind of stuff. It's laborious. A person has to sit there and do it. You're messing with stuff in Excel, like getting the import ready and all this kind of stuff. But put the records back, like all this stuff. It's painful. That said, if you can use something like a progressive backup to restore to, that may not be necessary. And that's a huge cost savings to the business. Obviously, also, it just means you lose way less data. And it's the same benefit. So,
all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot here real quick and cover one minor thing on this.
There is a quick question before are increments only since the last backup schedule or longer, i.e. resets at the next backup? ?
They are totally independent of any backup schedules you have. They're every 5 minutes. I think they're every 5 minutes, right? Is that hard to set? That used to be a setting in there you could change.
It's a setting. You command line, I think only,
Okay.
maybe API. I don't remember, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's totally independent. I run a pretty religious backup schedule, so I don't use the incrementals because it's somewhat redundant, but it's another tool in your toolbox, shall we say, right? Another tool in the toolbox. So, all right. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, we turn it on by default for most client server deployments at this point. Just as Richard says, you can kind of decide whether or not you want it, because for a lot of situations, it's redundant 100%. And if you're not a business where the data moves fast enough where a 5-minute backup makes sense to you, then you're like, you can ignore it. You're like, I don't know.
Okay,
so
yeah, exactly. So you pick that. So now let's talk about the one little, I said that hard linking works most everywhere all the time in all cases, except for like one little outlier. And I don't know how big of an outlier this is or not. So if you read down here, there's a description of progressive backup, schedule backups, etc. Then it says this thing about Windows REFS volume. Okay, and I'm not sure what that is, but it's some sort of resilient file system volume. It doesn't fundamentally support hard linking. So here's the deal: Linux fundamentally, Mac fundamentally, the drive. I don't know, what do we call it? The specifications, the way the data is saved on the drives. What do you call the format? The file system.
Yeah.
On Mac and Windows historically, and Mac and Linux, they've all supported hard linking. And that's the idea that you have one real file and then multiple references to it that look like real files, and they quack and act like real files, but they're not, right? That's what we showed, that big savings. Apparently, Windows REFS is newer than the hard linking technology we're using. And so wherever this came out, it doesn't support hard linking at all. It's not a Claris thing like Claris socks. This is a Microsoft socks or something. I don't know. Jacob, can you give us some color onto this REFS thing?
Yeah, so I actually don't know what its like current status is. Basically, so it's a minor deep dive. 90s era, we had FAT FAT or FAT32 formatting for disks.
do that for all of us. So FAT32,
So like that was like the old Microsoft one. If you ever used,
Yep.
I'll say Windows 98, 95, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that was just past DOS, basically, you had an actual graphic interface. Usually that was the format. Later we ended up in the era of XP, at least. I know 2000 did it too, and I don't know what version they shipped it in. NTFS was the next one. That's what we, for the most part, actually use to this day. If you're on Windows, it works. People, it's got problems, blah blah blah, whatever. You can complain about stuff, but we know how it works. It functions. It doesn't lose data, etc. Okay. So Microsoft, in I don't know, ballpark of 10 years ago, was like, hey, we should do something better, more flexible, that's more resilient. They were looking for certain other properties that just NTFS doesn't do it, wasn't designed to. It would be difficult to add it, just don't deal with it. Okay, make a new thing. Got it. I don't know what its status is because they shipped this. I think support is still in Windows Server, but it's not on by default, and they only turned it on by default in like one old version I remember from years ago. They stopped running it at default because it kept losing people's data, which
really,
it's kind of the opposite of a resilient file system. But
well, here's the wiki on it. I am proprietary, blah blah blah, with 2012.
2012. There we go. That's
designed to overcome problems. These requirements arose in turn, blah 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 blah. As a result, the file system needs to be self-repairing, blah blah blah. The key advantage, blah 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 blah. Sounds like it's current.
It does integrity checking built in. I get it. Okay. So it's got all the nice.
Remove features. Some NTS features not implemented. Hard linking. I don't know if you'll see that. Bunch of
really important stuff.
Has been initially unsupported for SQL Server.
Nice. Hard links were introduced with Server 2022 as a preview. Nice. So we may actually get that someday.
Well, Claris would have to turn it back on because I think Claris sees that it's not, and they don't even try to call it. I would guess, but all right. Well, maybe someday. So,
and so for the people that are watching, just context, file systems are developed over decades at this point. And if you think about it, you write a piece of software that is so critical to somebody's computer, right? We're talking about backups. We're talking about data integrity, being able to some of the stuff at the top that they were talking about, some of those features are you could literally damage the data in the file system and it is able to put it back, unroll the damage. So that's
like a
huge.
RAID drive or something like that.
But built not at the drive level, but one step up from that, right? So that would be huge. It is huge. And so it's this particular moment on this day that we're streaming, is it ready for use yet? Is it going to do your specific application exactly what you need for that? Maybe, right? You have to go look at that. This is something that server people do. We go and analyze problems like this, and we go, all right, is this going to
help us or result in more?
Is it going to be more problems than it's worth? All that, right?
More phone calls. Okay. Yep. All right, so that covers that part of it. That's a good part of the conversation. Go questions. With this is a tower. Go with questions. Big orange or dark orange. Dark orange.
If progressive backup is set and have an hourly backup, will it create a full backup every hour and will contain a progressive backup folder? ?
You will have 2 full sets of backups. Yes,
but it doesn't write a full copy. The progressives, all it does is writes the changes. If there's any changes, glues them in and says, "Ta-da, it's done." And then when it's going to make the next progressive, it the hard link or does it duplicate the one or just or takes one of them and moves them up? So I think there's always two real ones that you can use.
It's the old one and the
one before that, and then there's one that's working on. So there's 2 that you can grab from. Hey, Crash, I'm going to grab one of these 2 complete ones, and there's one in progress. And so really, it's working on 3 copies at any given time. It's working on but it never writes the whole thing because it doesn't have to because you didn't change the whole file, right? So I think it's basically playing. It's like the cup game where you have the 3 cups on the thing, and people where's the nut under the cup? Or that kind of crap's going on. And so the idea is that you have 3 copies, 2 of which are ready for customer use, immediately. And the in progress one you shouldn't use because it's busily taking another copy and gluing changes to it if there are changes. If you're not making changes, the progressive backup is just going to, it's not going to do much work. It's just going to a little bit of lipstick on the pig and it's done. So
I think it essentially changes the name of the folder and calls
that's
it
about it.
So,
like literally when I said lipstick on a pig, I meant that. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, more questions. If you want to go back to the page where Claris was defining what a progressive backup was, the last sentence under progressive needs clarity, multiple question marks.
I'm going to read it, and then Jacob is going to provide clarity. Progressive backups keep 2 copies of the backup files. This is 2 that you can use as a administrator, okay? A timestamp copy that is available to you, the backup, and in progress copy gets updated with cumulative changes. There used to be 2 that you could use, and then it was working on 1. Is it down to 1 and 1 now, Jacob? I mean, from this, it sounds like there's 1 that you can use and 1 that it's working on.
It used to keep 2.
It used to keep 2, always 2 that were done and locked in, and then it was always working on the next one. Then it would move that one up.
The in progress one and the in progress one would have like the temp copy, basically, if you want to call it that, and then the changes folder had I think they're FXL files and those are the increments, basically the record. They're kind of like database transactions essentially.
We're back on this. So this is the administrative console. This is the drive. So we're in FileMaker server, data, progressive, and this is the contents of progressive. So the incremental backup. So these are the 2. Okay, this is correct. These are the 2 right here. If I crash like right now in this moment in time, either one of those 2 I can use, and they're different by 5 minutes, 5-minute backups. Okay. Then these are the changes that will get rolled up when it builds a new one. Okay, because it's going to take the old one right here. Or the old one right here. It's going to toss it away and then take all this stuff and roll it up and make a new one right here. And so you always have 2. So you have basically, I'm giving you a better explanation. There are 2 that you can use, and there's 1 in progress. There's really kind of 3, but you don't want to touch this last one because bad juju, right? And it's bits and pieces and chopped up, right? So understand it's because if they say there's only 2, then you don't understand what it's actually doing, because I'm trying to give you a little more technical depth.
Expand the interval, any of the changes in FMS folders, so we can see what's inside.
Oh, you want to see them in here? I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Those are a little XML files of the that was changed.
Those are the increments. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. So when I say so pull that window up just a little bit so we can see the size of those files, because that's what I want to demonstrate. So you guys are this is what I wanted to show it, like full,
I think this right here, because I haven't been, we're not editing these right now. So I think all this file is telling you that if there were changes, they would be in here, and 176 is just the header and the footer for that file. And that's it. There's nothing else in there. There's no changes in there because we're not making changes. If I made a change right now, then you'd see it populate in there, and then the number would be different. But see, you can't use these yet until it finishes running. And it's going to, and if we sit here and stare at this, it's going to take this one, it's going to eject it into space. This one will become an old one, and then there'll be a new one where it rolls all this up here. But really, it's going to see that these 176 are all empty with no changes. It's going to do it like that. So, in fact, 48. Yeah, 1 more minute. This is all going to cycle down here at the bottom. Okay. So, does that make sense? So there's really 2 that you can use. There it goes. It just lost it. Did one wild. There it is, 44 and 49, right? And the one that was there, and now it started working on the next set of changes. So it's got 2 that you can use, and 1 it's doing surgery on. Okay, we follow? Yes, everyone? And the surgery one you can't use until it spits out, and then it becomes one of these 2 down here. This is great training. I haven't done this.
There's your 49, yeah.
So we're going to start with Stu. The increments must have a baseline somewhere. Sounds like it's the last progressive backup, yes? So it's like a 5-minute backup schedule with only 1 backup retained.
You have 2 backups in here, and so the 3rd one is coming probably from the 3rd copy or something, whatever it did.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. So on restoration, the incrementals get rolled up automatically? ?
You don't have to worry about that. Yes. His question was about restoring the database. So the server will clean up after itself is the short answer to the question. Yes. If you're like thinking about the different permutations, I stopped FileMaker server and came back, I don't know, restore an image from a backup, something like that. You do not have to worry about that. That is FileMaker's problem to deal with. And actually, it does so. It does it just fine.
It was a question. I'm not saying the question. It was about cleaning up after an in-flight malfunction.
Yeah,
it auto cleans.
No, it was about what happens to the incremental when you restore from a backup. Like what actually happens to those files afterwards. The ones that are there, that are temporary, that are whatever.
They're going to get ejected. It'll take care of them. You don't have to worry about it.
Yep. It'll make new ones. Yep.
Yeah. Well, if you close the files right now, then the incremental backups will start to reflect that change in the number of open files, right? Like if I suddenly close half of these files or most of these files, then suddenly all the stuff in these intervals right here, it's going to, like if I only leave like 2 files open, these 2, then I turn the rest of them off, then these other ones are going to go away. It's dealing with it at that moment in time. And if there's only 2 files open over here, then you're only going to have 2 over here. And if there were some other ones here for whatever reason, they'll get carved up and cleaned up and removed.
Progressive is only for FMP12 and not containers? ?
Should do containers. I don't know.
Open it.
Let me open this up. Dana, let's see. There's Richard Carlton FMS.
That one's gonna have. Yep. You have items.
Yeah, I have data. It's in there secure. Yeah, they're in here. They're in here. But it's not. But here's the deal. You know what? FileMaker is gluing the FMP12 file with changes together. It's not going to do that on PDFs, and FileMaker can do it to its own file format because they know the secret sauce to make the file format work. If you add a page to your PDF, it's not going to go, hey, he added a page, just one PDF. This thing here is going to replace the whole PDF. But Claris does what they do because they're worried about the FMP12 files being backed up as fast as possible.
And if the server crashes, what happens with the progressives?
Let's talk about 2 scenarios. The server crashes, you go, and then you put it back on, and it starts up. If you follow my instructions and you have the server set to not auto start, you will come up over here and you will have these 2 copies sitting here waiting for you. Okay. I don't know about these, about the old progressive, this one that was kind of chewing on it, working on it. This was the next one. These are the 2. You'll have those folders. See, it just cycled again just now. You have these. I had 2 selected. One of them went away. Now I have these 2. So that you would add that. Now, if you tell it to auto start, then it's going to attempt to open the files up, see if they're damaged. And then what it'll do is it will wipe this stuff out and start recooking it, is what it'll do. So if you have auto start, I would expect the incremental backup directory folder to be purged and reset on start, would be my guess. That's another reason not to auto start, because assuming you want to use incremental backups. See, Claris wants to get to the point where this stuff does itself automatically. And I think they will get there eventually, but it's been like this since FileMaker 2 server came out with backups. It's been this way in terms of always restore from a backup, always restore from backup. Okay. And so that hasn't changed since 95 or 96, whenever we got, we got the FileMaker server. I was still in college, so 93. 93 is when the first FileMaker server came out.
Did we
next week?
Any of the
are we gonna ever go back and cover
topics?
This topic? We never even got to yours today.
We didn't get to any of the in-depth.
We can. We
could bump Nick again, but he might get really grumpy.
No, don't bump Nick. We need to do more server coverage anyway, so we'll just schedule some more.
We'll take it under advisement when the time is right. We'll talk about.
There's more to cover. This is an excellent one. We haven't done this in a long time.
Am I supposed to run the end credits now?
Run the end credit. Play the end credits. That'd be really good. report of an individual up here who maybe a FileMaker license. Well, it's potentially expired. Look in the back of that car right there. Looks like the FileMaker license has expired. Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle. Sir, step out of the vehicle. Sir.